The Mrs. New York and Mrs. America pageants are an opportunity to promote great causes like spina bifida awareness, research, and resources.
And today's guest is a decorated U.S. Army officer with a very personal reason for her platform.
This is Enable, the Disability Podcast, where we'll share stories, experiences, support, resources, and more for people with disabilities and different abilities. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. My name is Def Jeff Herbert.
And my name is Kurt Howard. We're talking with Colonel Christina Fanitzi, who is Mrs. New York 2025 and Mrs. America finalist, and so much more. Thank you for your service, and thank you for joining us.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Kurt and Jeff. I really appreciate you allowing me to be on with you. It's an honor for me today.
All right, we appreciate it. Christina, please start off by telling us about yourself and your family. How was your son diagnosed with spina bifida?
Yeah, I'm a career military officer. As Kurt mentioned, I've been in the United States Army as a military intelligence officer for over 22 and a half years now. And about 3 years ago, my husband and I, who is an active duty Marine Corps officer, we were stationed in Hawaii, where I served as a battalion commander, a role that only 9% of women achieved that year that I was serving. And I became pregnant. And it was not necessarily on our plan. But like my mom says, if you want to tell God a joke, tell him a plan. And so it was a hard day to become pregnant as a battalion commander. And then 16 weeks into the pregnancy, I learned my son during a routine ultrasound would come with spina bifida. And that is a neural tube defect that impacts mobility, continence, and development. And so that's a little bit about me, our story, and how we were diagnosed.
So, what kind of resources and support do you need for his condition?
Yeah, so spina bifida is the single most non-life-threatening birth defect in our country, that it's a permanent disability. And folks with spina bifida are tricky because they require sometimes 8 to 10 specialists on their team. The quarterback of their team is the pediatric or if it's an adult living with spina bifida, the neurosurgeon, because spina bifida affects the neural tube and the spine. That doctor will identify things like hydrocephalus, tether cord, and be, the intervention specialist on that. But then there's a whole series of therapies that are needed for folks with spina bifida. So my son sees speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy. He has a urologist. He has a spina bifida doctor. He has a pediatrician. And then it's whatever else he's going to need throughout his life. And so somebody that lives with spina bifida is really destined for a life of intervention. There's never a one and done. It's effectively okay, we're gonna have what we have now until we don't, and then we're gonna intervene to maintain or not lose. But there's never a real gain. It's only kind of like a maintain or lose situation over the course of their life.
As far as today and medical advances, are there things they can do in utero to correct the problem or help the situation?
That's a great question. And so when we were diagnosed, and you think like being diagnosed with I wasn't diagnosed, but my son was in Euro. You think that like being a military officer that I would be equipped to handle it. And really I was crushed under the weight of carrying a child with spina bifida, because the options that they give you when the diagnosis first happens is we were handed a 3-page black and white pamphlet about spina bifida. And it wasn't even a packet. It was like a printout, like a WebMD type of printout. And it was like, here's spina bifida. Here's the 3 types of it. Here's your 3 options. Option 1 is terminate. Option 2 is, and the other 2 are different types of in utero options. And our doctors were really kind. They weren't unempathetic, they just ill prepared. And I don't think that story is unique to me. I think that's the average family that gets diagnosed with spina bifida story. And we were the first case in 5 years in the island of Hawaii that they had seen with spina bifida. And so they flew us immediately, and thank God for the benefits that exist in the Army, the insurances we have, and the support from the chain of command. They flew us to Children's Hospital of Los Angeles and the Cincinnati Children's Hospital to be seen by their specialists in order to determine if we qualified for the in utero repair. it's exceedingly risky for the mom. And there's two types of surgery. One is laparoscopic, the other one is significantly invasive. But in either way, the membranes of the amniotic sac are punctuated to then repair the defect in the baby. And so the mother has until about the 27th week to decide if they qualify, if they'd like to do this in utero repair. And then usually the hospital will not let them leave the hospital until they give birth, or they're in complete bed rest near to the hospital. That's kind of where the evolution has come now. Because most of the time in those that get the in utero repair, the membranes do break early. They do tend to have earlier pregnancies. They tend to give birth around the 33rd to 36th week. However, the outcomes are significantly improved for the baby in terms of mobility and continence if the utero repair is done, because then the amniotic sac doesn't have the opportunity to attack those nerve endings that are exposed in the defect. Most people that qualify want to do it. I mean, most moms are like, I would have done anything for Christian. For me, even as a military professional, I was like, I would do this for my son. We just didn't qualify, not because of insurance, because of the risk to the mom. The doctors have a really high threshold for their willingness to do the surgery at risk of the mother. And so there was a little bit of friction between the doctors on whether Christian's hindbrain herniation was present enough to do the surgery. And so doctors wouldn't do it. We were pretty crushed by that, because we know that the in utero repair achieves so much better outcomes for the baby.
That's a lot of decisions to go through. But I am curious, eventually you decided to run for Mrs. New York and Mrs. America. How did you decide on that? When did you decide on that? And did you know your platform right away?
Yeah, so when I was became pregnant, it was a really hard day, and then when we got diagnosed, it was the worst day of my life. And carrying Christian, there were 7 MRIs I went through alone, ultrasound every other week, and I was leading this battalion of 500 people. And when you're a leader, you have no problems, right? You just lead through everybody else's problems. But I had big problems and I had big worries, and the pregnancy was not a fun or happy or easy pregnancy. And so when Christian came and I was crushed under the weight of commanding a battalion, being a special needs mom, and the identity change that I think all women go through and don't talk about in becoming a mom, I was like in a downward spiral. And you would have thought, like, somebody that's been to combat twice, somebody that served in the military, somebody that's jumped out of airplanes, somebody that worked in the White House, like, I could do it. And I really couldn't. And I was in a really, really bad place until one day I saw on the interwebs that Madison Marsh, an active duty Air Force officer, had become Miss America. And I'm like, wait a second, we could do this? I was saying to my husband, I'm like, if the Air Force can have Miss America, the Army can have Mrs. America. And my husband was like, there is no Mrs. America. And I was like, let me just see about that. And I found that there was a New York pageant. And I immediately called the director, Diane Hardgrove, and I talked to her. And I realized that this pageant, the Mrs. America system, was about fellowship, it was about fitness, and it was about community service, things that I had gone away from that I love. And I realized that through pageantry, I could do something with my hands and I could put my military leadership into the community I now belong to and serve my country in a different way. And so that was the path that led me to pageantry. But like, I knew what I wanted to serve, but like, honestly, Jeff, I didn't know what a platform was. I didn't know anything about pageantry. I didn't know about hair extensions. I had never gotten acrylic nails in my entire life, like before 18 months ago. So I did a very methodical like assessment of what I wanted to achieve. And then you know what it just boiled down to? Like a lot of women have names for their platform, and they start like, the co-founder of whatever. And I'm like, you know what? My platform is Spina Bifida Awareness, in direct partnership with the Spina Bifida Association of New York. And my mission is to make a better and brighter future for the 4,000 New Yorkers like my son. And that became clean and consistent, and it just drove me. So the next call I made after I called the pageant director was I emailed the Spina Bifida Association in New York, and I had a cold call with their directors, Julia Duff, and the assistant Kathleen Watt, and I was like, how do I help? And I think they were like, holy crap, who is this woman? She is like on fire. But it became the beginning of a beautiful relationship. And so I've been able to do a lot with the Spina Bifida Association of New York, most notably as Mrs. Hudson Valley, which was my local title. There was no presence in the Hudson Valley in New York for Spina Bifida. Basically, like Albany had some presence, a little bit in Long Island, and a little tiny bit in Rochester, and then nothing across the state. And I was like, all right, my job is the Hudson Valley. And I just literally started to go to events. And my first appearance was at and a Blossom Fest in my hometown because I grew up in New York, which was also like really compelling about competing for Mrs. New York because I love this state. It made me, but I was like literally on the back of a flatbed with hay and with a microphone. And I had the like Blossom Festival t-shirt on they gave me. And I was like, hi, I'm Colonel Christina Fanitzi. I have my sash on. I'm competing for Mrs. New York Spina Bifida. And two people came up to me. One person I'd known my whole life and said, my daughter's daughter, my granddaughter, has spina bifida, and they never talked about it because she's mobile and you wouldn't know that she has it. And then somebody else came out to me, it's like, I've been an adult living with spina bifida. And I was like, okay. And one day on the back of a stump, basically, I found two, families with spina bifida. So I said, okay, well, we have this national walk and roll, why don't we have one in the Hudson Valley? And so through the like walk and roll last year, we had our first annual. 3 weeks ago, we had our second annual, and we're up to 8 families, maybe 10 in the Hudson Valley now that are connected that had no connection to spina bifida before. So, and then probably the second most thing I'm proud of through pageantry is I am in direct coordination right now with some legislators in Albany to make a $500,000 budget proposal to the New York State legislator for the Spina Bifida Association, because right now the Spina Bifida Association is only allocated $4 for every single person with spina bifida, and the rest of it comes from fundraising families like me. And it seems counterproductive that the families that, whether they need the programming or not, that they're the ones that are having to do the fundraising for the services they require. So, long answer to your short question, pageantry, a crown and a sash gave me an inroad that my combat boots and my rank couldn't. And I am not regretful about that. I'm very proud of it. And I would encourage anybody that is having some sort of experience in the moment that this could be a venue for you to find yourself again and find your community again and find your purpose.
Well, thank you very much, Christina. This podcast is really about trying to bring people together and to help people so they don't feel so alone and that they're the only ones dealing with this. And I just want to say you should feel really proud. You've accomplished a great deal. Recently, you were also named New York State's Mother of the Year.
Wild.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask a little bit about mom.
Yeah.
And your role as a mom, and perhaps your greatest accomplishment is Christian.
Mm.
You had said something, or I read something about your parenting philosophy that really struck a chord with me.
No.
And I know that you rely heavily on your faith, but that you've also tried to make Christian independent
100%.
And focus on that. So I think our listeners would like to hear a little more about that.
Well, first of all, thank you, Kurt, because like I'm here trying to be a soldier and a mom, and the mom always like makes me cry. I'm like welling up. I'm like, oh my God, get it together. You're an Army officer. They can see you. My greatest title, I've had a lot of titles. My greatest title is Christian's mom. And that's for sure. And when we were diagnosed, um, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing I could do. The only thing I could do was pray. And I thought I could pray and I could move because I had this like weird, unscientifically proven feeling that if I kept moving, that maybe that kid would keep moving. And then maybe if he could move on the inside, he can move on the outside. And so while I was pregnant, I did my first triathlon. I did my second triathlon too, postpartum, and I worked out all the time. I ran until I was about 5 months pregnant. And I remember I was pushing Humvees with my soldiers at about 9.5 months pregnant. And I was carrying like all these water cans and lifting them. And frankly, I'll be honest with you, I was beating a lot of my soldiers, a lot of the men that were not um,
I'm not
pregnant.
surprised.
And a lot of people were motivated by it. Some people felt like I had something to prove. And in some ways I did. I wanted to prove that pregnant soldiers were still soldiers. I needed something to get myself through like what we were going through. And then while I was pregnant, I was reading a ton about spina bifida. Like by the time we came in for like our third appointment, my maternal fetal doctor was like, "I think you know more about spina bifida than I do." I was like, "I have to." It was the only way I could get through it. And one of the things I read was that adults with spina bifida really suffer with adult executive skills, and something as small as like how do you brush your teeth every day. A lot of my girlfriends that are moms with spina bifida for their children that are like 7 or 8, they'll have a list of what they need to do, and they really struggle with that routine self-care. And so I was like, I need this kid, whatever he comes with, to be able to face whatever is like thrown at him, and to have like the courage and independence to do that. So from like the day he was born, I would be like, "Hey Christian, what would you like to wear? This blue or this green onesie?" And he couldn't answer me, but if I took like a signal from him, I would give that, to him. And then when he falls a lot. My son can walk, which is a miracle. Because of the hydrocephalus, his head is quite large, and he's really wobbly. He can't feel his feet at the same rate a kid without spina bifida can. He doesn't have the core strength, and he has this massive head, and so he falls a lot. And we just, we're like, "All right, like, you're okay, get up." And the truth is, you got to lay in the bed you make. And I've created a little boy that knows his mind. And so he gives me a run for my money, but Christian knows his mind, and he speaks his mind, and he says what he wants, and he says what he doesn't. And I'm like, well, mission accomplished. And so that's how I got through the diagnosis, with through faith and movement, and inculcating Christ in my son, and independence in my son and in my home.
Good work.
Oh, I don't know about that. My work's not done. That kid's only almost 3. I got a long way to go.
Sure.
This is Enable the Disability Podcast. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We love to share different stories because, like Kurt said, even when it feels like it, you're not alone. We're not defined solely by the things we can't do when there's so many things we can do.
On that note, Christina, one of the things that we'd like to hear a little bit more about is Christian's maybe his special abilities and what you guys like to do for fun as a family.
Christian is amazing, and Christian is a miracle. We are very blessed. When Christian was born, his everything in the science and everything in the amnio, the scans, everything showed that his defect was open in the back. There was cerebral spinal fluid in my amniotic fluid. The picture showed that he had an open defect. When he was born, the defect had several different textures, and in the middle, it was closed. And it was like it was different. It was clear that over the pregnancy that his defect changed. And so my son's a complete miracle. And so he loves it all. He loves everything, regular, healthy, completely able-bodied 2.5-year-old likes. He likes trucks. He likes trains. He likes Legos. He loves books. He loves a little blue truck. As a family, my husband is very outdoorsy. We walk all the time. My son loves going on long walks. Whether it's like pushed or carried or whatever, but we took him out as a baby every day, no matter the real weather. I mean, downpouring rain, we wouldn't, but snow, rain. So he's like fearless about being outside. Um, and we pray as a family. We pray in the morning, we pray at night. And my son's, the first thing he likes to play for is Little Blue Truck. It's his favorite book. And he's like, "Let's play for Little Blue Truck." And I'm like, "That's fine." But he also knows to pray for people that are sick. And so he prays for his friends, he prays for all his toys, and he prays for family members that we know that currently have other ailments. So he's like a regular, very curious 2.5-year-old boy.
Outstanding.
Do you face any challenges when you're going out with your family? Do you go to like movie theaters or restaurants and things like that? Is it different?
I don't currently because Christian is still in diapers, so we don't, and he doesn't need to be cathed just yet. So we don't face any struggles when we go out because he kind of goes to the bathroom in the diaper and he is mobile. But that's not the case for my friends that have spina bifida, whether they are adults or whether they're children. And so I have my little cohort of spina bifida moms, and I have a girlfriend that going to the beach is awful for her. So in the summer, when most people are going to the beach and doing all these things, like she has a really hard time because her son is mobile with crutches. And so going to the beach is like a significant emotional event because it's just not the same experience that other families are going to. Or um, we'll have a walk-in role in like an adaptive park, right? And there'll be all this stuff that's adaptive, but yet the where the pavilion is, the playground is 8,000 years away. So the kids that are in gait trainers or crutches, like they have to we have to like figure out like, no, this isn't a park that's going to be sustainable for us. Or how do we get the families from the car to the pavilion in places that are considered adaptable? Or an adaptive bathroom. My friends with spina bifida, they'll come and they'll be able to get into the bathroom, um, and they'll be able to get into the stall, but then the hand washing stations are too high for them. Or it's an adaptive bathroom, but it doesn't have like an automatic door. So how, like, as a wheel, when you have a wheelchair now, all of my friends that live with spina bifida, all the families, they all figure it out. But I would caution people to be more aware of, of when things are adaptive, are they really adaptive? Or like, did you do one thing and slapped a handicap sign on it and call it a day? Like, can a family or a person really navigate it? And I think widely the answer to that is pretty low or no, in my experience. That has not been my family's challenge. But that has been a challenge for the community I'm a part of.
In your role as a mom, what do you wish more people understood about you?
Well, I think that people would look at me and be like, oh, she's an Army officer in New York State, Mother of the Year, all this stuff. But I struggle. It's not easy. I mean, it's not effortless. It takes a lot of work. I get up in the morning, I go to work and I work all day. And when I'm in the Army, I'm doing the Army thing. I'm focused on the Army. I allocate every day since Christian's been diagnosed, I do something for his medical care. I've had to truncate that. Like some days I've said, I'm at work. I can only do this for 2 hours. Like I can only do this for my lunch break. I can't do this in perpetuity. So, for the moms overwhelmed by that, like you have to set some boundaries of what you're capable of. And then I come home and I try to be very present with Christian for the like hour and a half or so that he's up after I get home from work. And then at night when he goes to bed, then I'm on the computer doing my advocacy and pageant and all that stuff. And so it doesn't come without investment. But nothing like worth it is easy, is what I would say. And so I got to give myself a lot of grace, and you got to give yourself grace because I mostly feel like I'm failing all over the place every day. Like I'm on your podcast, I have no makeup on, my hair is like barely, put together, and it's like you can only do what you can do, but you're doing the best that you could possibly do, and your kid knows it. And so, like my son is smiley and happy, and he's polite, and I look at that and I'm like, okay, like he knows he's loved and he loves others, and you know what? I'm doing okay.
Yeah, I would say you're doing more than okay.
Ah, thanks.
Really, Christina, there's an inner beauty that's shining through this morning. So
Oh,
thank you so much.
thank thank you. But that's what I'd say. It's um and that you could really do anything you put your mind to, and it's okay for you to do things that you're passionate about so that you can invest in your family. Like doing this work and this pageantry work and the work with spina bifida, it's made me a better soldier. It's made me a better mom. It's made me a better wife, because I've been able pour into others, and in doing so, poured back into myself a little bit. And so that's what I would tell other moms out there.
Well said. Do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share before we go?
Gratitude to both of you for reaching out and letting me be on this podcast and creating a platform for folks to have a community and have these conversations. I'm grateful for that. And I like what you said, Jeff. I spent a lot of my weekends hanging out with folks that are disabled, and I don't even know if I love that word so much, but what I've learned in hanging out and spending most of my weekends with folks that have it a little bit more challenging than others is that ability does not come from the waist down. It comes from the waist up. And so that's what I would leave you with.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christina, so much for joining us. This is Enable the Disability Podcast. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. Please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And of course, please share this podcast with your family and friends so we can share stories about people with different abilities that bring us all together. Thank you.